Jonathan Michael Griffiths, welcome. Thank you so much for coming over to my YouTube channel and giving us this interview. I'm very excited for what we're going to talk about today regarding competing on a carnivore diet. But first, would you mind giving us a little bit of a background about yourself?
Hi, Sarah. Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I'm a 26-year-old bodybuilder from the south of England. Been competing since 2012. So quite a long time, really. I've probably done about 7 or 8 shows in that span. I did a show recently in September. I didn't place where I wanted, but it was actually the easiest diet I've ever had to follow. I also dieted on more calories than previously, in like a few years before. I did my in human nutrition and been passionate about exercise since I was probably 13 years old, probably. Yeah.
Okay. And how many preps have you done on a carnivore diet?
I'd say technically all of them, because the last 2 weeks usually you actually do a lot of people do to get in shape quicker, as they do it with rabbit starvation sort of thing. So they'll do basically Ted Naiman's PE diet.
Yeah.
So that's where you elevate protein and reduce the energy substrate.
Right.
But other than that, it's been more so apparent. The last show I did, I was able to eat a lot more because I did the whole prep with carnivore diet. There's only probably a few occasions where I'd have a meal out of family. That's just where adaptations come about, or I'd add like maybe some potatoes in one day or something. But it's more just to keep the energy going, because I'm not someone that usually diets on it year round. It's more just for competitions.
Okay, so outside of a competition, how's your diet?
I'd say hyper carnivore. So probably about 70% animal products.
Right.
Mostly beef, chicken, and eggs. I eat mackerel and other fish like that. I have a very varied diet in that regard. Yeah.
And of the plant foods, what are the most common plant foods you would normally eat?
I'd say at the moment it's probably rice, potatoes, and condiments really. So like salt, pepper, spices, things like that.
So I wonder, when you go back and you reintroduce the rice and the potatoes, do you feel any difference with aches and pains and soreness after your workouts?
I do, yeah. I must notice when I go back onto them, it's almost like your body has to readjust. So people that go from a carnivore diet initially to diet with carbohydrates and bread and whatever, pasta, obviously their gut microbiome's not suited to that. So they're trying to force the body to do something it's not stabilized to yet. So
yeah,
I did notice a lot of joint pain when I added carbs in. Yeah, but I tried to choose ones which are less toxic, quote unquote. So
right. So white rice is better than brown rice because the brown rice has more lectins, more of the anti-nutrients. So it has a greater potential to lead to more of these aches and pains. And I've noticed personally, that's why I wanted to ask you, because it is such a stark difference. If I do ever eat a small serving of rice or anything like that, I'm still training the same way, but now like the next day I feel more sore, or I wake up in the morning and I feel like I have neck pain, and I'm thinking maybe it's of the way that I slept. But why does it always coincide with the time that I do go ahead and eat some plant food? So now I am convinced that that's probably what's causing it. And another thing I noticed is that when I'm doing carnivore all the time, I don't need as much rest and recovery. So this is something also that I wanted to make sure I ask you, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, because I kind of want to go like step by step. First, we're talking about the diet, right? And we're talking about how you're doing the carnivore, especially during your prep. And so how many weeks or months are your preps, generally speaking?
My last prep was approximately, had a gap in between for about 2 months maybe, but it was about 18 months. But basically what happened was COVID happened, so there's a lot of lockdowns, so I couldn't then compete. I was in shape, like ready to go like 2-3 weeks later, but obviously no shows are being hosted. So ultimately my last show, probably I'd say like strict regimented dieting, I'd say 8 to 10 weeks.
Okay. So for those 8 to 10 weeks is full-blown carnivore. There is no rice, there's none of that stuff, right?
virtually, yeah. So I think maybe a handful of times, I think I had a pizza out with family.
Mm.
I didn't see my dad and that lot for maybe 6 months prior to that. So it's quite important to me to still have that kind of tradition, social occasion sort of thing. But other than that, the next day I went straight back on it. I don't sort of think, oh, I'll write today off, you know. So
Right. Okay. And what would you say your percentage of fat is before, outside of prep, and then in those, let's say, 12 weeks of prep? Like, how does it differ?
it varies quite a lot. That'd be an interesting topic to go into. So I'd say if we start around 12% and it goes down to about 5%. If I use skin fold calipers, it goes down to about 3.5%. But some people look different at different body fat, so it's hard to sort of say. You'll see two people with the same body fat percentage, like measurement wise, but they'll look vastly different. So
I was actually asking about the fat in your diet, but I was going to anyway ask you about body composition, but that's still great because that was definitely something I wanted you to answer. But what is the technique that you're using for body composition?
So basically, I was doing elevated protein, high to moderate fat.
No. What is the like the skin fold calipers? What you're using for body fat testing? Is that the only thing you use? Have you done, let's say, a DEXA scan or underwater weight?
No, unfortunately not. No, that'd have been more interesting to look into.
Right, that would be cool. Yeah, but the calipers are very accurate, especially, I don't know if you're doing it or your trainer is doing it, and if they have good technique. I think like the standard error associated with that is like plus or minus 3.5%. So it's pretty accurate for such a practical tool. Yeah.
I mean, I think I was doing it every Tuesday. I was doing a nine-fold caliper test.
Right.
So between that, you're going to get a decent average, and it was always me that was doing it. So
you're doing it, yeah.
Yeah, somehow I got back there. Yeah.
I was gonna ask that. I cannot imagine myself doing a 9-site caliper test by myself.
I managed to get my mum to do a couple on my back, but
okay, no, see, that makes sense. Okay. So you go from 12% to 5%, and the lowest you've ever hit was 3.5%. That's insane. How does your energy level?
At that point, I've got to be completely honest. Your feet feel like you're walking on stones all the time. You sit down on a bench and you get marks. If you take your clothes off, you get marks underneath where the bench was. Your circulation gets cut off if you sit down for too long. Head spins. When you get to that low body fat, but that's almost where like the fat leveraging helps. So you have a bit more energy, like substrate to work off.
Right. Yeah. Doing it with a slightly more fat in your diet is probably beneficial. And also, I think, when you take out the carbs, as you get leaner and leaner, keeping some fats in is going to help your hormones, right? It's going to prevent those serious dips in testosterone and a lot of, I know at least in the women who are competing, some of them really struggle even after they finish competition. So
I've noticed that with a lot of female competitors, they can't diet on lower fat successfully, at least with adequate hormones, and still maintain the menstrual cycle. Men can get away with a bit lower in ratio, but it's not optimal. When you're 3-4% body fat, your body's not working like a normal human. You drink water and half an hour later in the loo. So it's literally that quick. Yeah.
Which category of bodybuilding are you competing in?
I do open bodybuilding, such like the super heavyweights. I managed to compete in the classic physique category recently. That was below, I think it had to be below 100 kilos. So I made it in just by like a kilo or two. So yeah, that was quite tough, but I made it. So
what are your goals with competition?
I'm unsure at the moment. I think I may switch to a more physique-based category. I've acquired an injury in my back basically from childhood. It's degraded quite badly, so I've got something called spondylolisthesis. So it means the back structure, like at the bottom of the spine, is fractured. So it means it slides the disc forward, therefore it compresses against the nerve. So it means I can't actually train my legs how I want to, which is really frustrating.
Of course. So do you do squats? Do you do deadlifts? Or because that could be tricky.
Deadlifts are pretty much out of the question. Most bent over things are. Squats I can do, but it's very light in there, 20 to 30 repetition sets. So it's just maybe my body weight max sort of thing.
So you're doing a lot of isolation machine work, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
Right. But it's working. Like because I'll post some pictures so people can see, and so that they can see how well developed your body is. And even with those, I mean, you're probably doing a lot of volume. Maybe actually now is a good time to give us a quick or detailed rundown of your training regimen with exercises, and then I want to go back and ask you a little bit more about the diet, but let's do the training segment.
The training, I'd say, has varied a lot over the years. So there's different training principles. There's DTP, FST7. There's, you probably haven't heard of them. Most people probably haven't. Y3T, the Dorian Yates method, Ronnie Coleman method, Arnold Schwarzenegger method. You know, there's all these sort of plans almost sort of thing, which people have like copied and tried it sort of thing. But at the moment I'm doing more of a push-pull leg split. So you do chest, shoulders, triceps. The next day you'll do back and biceps. The day after that you'll do quadriceps, hamstrings and calves. I'll do that probably 5 sessions a week in total, but I just rotate it.
5 sessions per week in total. So you're taking 2 days off of weightlifting.
That's right.
Okay. And how long do your sessions last?
I'd say around about an hour and a half, which seems to be about, it's a good hour and a half as well. It's not standing around chatting for too long. I'd say that's about the peak of what most people probably can do, unless you're perhaps a strongman competitor where you're training to have strength endurance sort of thing, you know.
An hour and a half. So how many sets would that translate? For example, let's say you're doing upper body, let's say you're doing front, you know, chest, triceps. Are you doing chest and triceps in the same day?
Yeah, chest, shoulders, triceps.
Yeah. So how many sets would that be per major muscle group?
I'd probably say about 8 to 10 maybe. Yeah.
See, this is also important, because when I'm teaching my students, and I mainly teach a nutrition, an introductory nutrition course, but we do have a chapter on exercise, and I show them the basics and how to create their own exercise program. So when we're talking about basic exercise recommendations, it's recommended that people do 3 to 4 sets per major muscle group. But then when people actually do that, they get frustrated because they're on Instagram and they're scrolling and they're seeing this great physiques, and they're like, why aren't I progressing as fast and I'm looking like these people? And that's because these people are training at least twice, if not 3 times as hard, the minimum recommendations. And so this is important for people to pay attention to, right? Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention for your viewers that are interested in that kind of paradigm is that the scientific studies, at least the most recent ones, suggest somewhere between 6 to 20 sets per body part.
Yeah.
So you got to take, that's per week. So you got to take into account the fact that that's a big variation, you know. One person could get the same results as the person 6 as 20.
Right.
So you just trial and error and find what suits you. And ultimately it comes down to effort. So I always get asked, what's better, high or low reps? I'm like, whatever lets you work harder. That's literally the answer. So
exactly, until failure. Like by the end of your set, you must feel like you can't do one more rep. Like that would be the ideal.
It's mostly like that, yeah.
Right.
Other than perhaps warm-ups, I do suggest people do warm-ups, but I'd be more inclined to sort of say the majority of my sets are close to or at failure.
Wow. So you're doing, let's say, 8 to 10 sets per major muscle group. Every one of those sets close to at failure.
Yeah.
That's very intense.
Bear in mind, I've been training since I was probably 13 or 14 years old. So it's 12 years of, it's majority of my life pretty much from training sets. I built up to that. I wouldn't prescribe that to someone. For example, I'm coaching a GB dodgeball athlete at the moment. I'm not putting him on my program. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm putting it on somewhat similar based on what I've tried and experienced. Then I translate that into someone that's a bit newer to the sort of bodybuilding game, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It takes a while for people to get that mind muscle connection and understand the level of intensity. And the brain also needs some time to adapt, you know,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
you're releasing a lot of those chemicals that allow you to tolerate the pain. So yeah, you have to gradually do that, and not, if you're a beginner, if you've never set foot in the gym, don't go training to failure on day one.
Yeah.
Like that's contraindicated. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
So an hour and a half of 8 sets per major muscle group, and you're taking 2 days of rest. Now, what about cardio?
Cardio. So I'd say my cardio at the moment is limited. It's hard to, unless you're about, I don't know, 19 stone, which might be 265 pounds roughly.
Okay.
It becomes very challenging at that body weight. And just doing a fasting kind of walk will get your heart rate right up. But I do cycling probably at least half an hour a day. So
Half
just a
an hour every day.
low moderate pace. Yeah, low moderate pace. So I'm not sweating, but yeah, it's just enough to get my heart rate up.
Right. Okay. And do you take any full recovery day where you're not doing anything at all?
I try to at least take 1 or 2 a week. Yeah. So I might work, say, 4 shifts in a week. I'll try and find a day where I just don't do anything. I don't move.
Right.
which is quite,
sit on a couch.
People that like training, it's hard to do, you know.
Interesting. And so you mentioned you started training at while you were very, very young. Where did you pick that from?
I initially started my younger teenage years quite overweight. Not enormous, but quite overweight. You'd think I was a podgy kid sort of thing. My brother basically took me to the gym when I was about 13 roughly, and I just went on the cardio machines, did some like chin ups and pull downs and some arms and some abs sort of thing. I just did the very basic, like mirror muscles, like, you know, ones that you like to do sort of thing. A bit of chest as well. And yes, I just trained with my brother. He had 2 years prior to me, like already training. So I learned of him pretty much most of what I know now.
That's interesting. That's really cool when you have somebody in your family modeling that behavior. Sometimes it's your parents, sometimes in your case it was your siblings. So and your first ever competition, you said in 2012, correct?
That's right, yeah.
So you were what? Wow. So that was you.
That's 16, I think.
You were very young. Yeah. And do you have the IFBB and the NPC? You know, here in the United States, we have the NPC as a league, as a bodybuilding league, and then the professionals or the IFBB. And then you have the WBFF, another major league as well. I mean, there are other ones, but those are like the big ones. What is the name of the league that you compete in?
I've done a few different ones. The one I started with was the BNBF, which is the British Natural Bodybuilding Federation. I feel like I kind of surpassed that at some point. I don't know when, but I want to compete with bigger people, like, and be more competitive. So I competed in the UK BFF, and other than that, I've done local shows. So. Yeah.
And eventually, what is the highest title? Are you shooting for the highest possible?
I would love to become a pro one day. Open bodybuilding, ideally. It seems more unlikely as time goes on, which from my back injury and things like that. But ultimately, it'd be a regional show, national show, compete for a pro card, and so forth.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure you also train and practice your posing, correct? A lot, right?
Yeah.
How often do you do that?
I do it in pitch black with no reflections, no mirrors. I don't want to see what I look like. I don't look at myself much in the gym. But yeah, I do it pretty much pitch black at just before bed, pretty much. Yeah.
So you
Might be.
practice it without looking at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel like eventually you will have to face and look at your posing? Because I mean, you're going to need some form of feedback to be able to improve that.
Yeah, so fortunately I had a bit of a coach last year called Marty Rice. He's in the South area as well.
Yeah.
He coached me a lot with posing, but prior to that I had posing practice with someone called Dietary Hacks.
Okay.
And that was for my first few shows, so quite a few years back now, but I think he put me for about 60 hours of posing for one prep. So yeah, that was a lot of posing, but I learned a lot from it. So it's not just how big your muscles are, it's how you show it. So ultimately you're a physique on a stage, so you got to paint it like an artist towards what you want to aspire to look like. So you got to show that, like the way your movements and the structure. So it's all about presentation as well.
Exactly. Yeah. That's something that people don't realize how much work goes into that until after they start preparing for a competition, or after their first competition, they realize just as much work has to go into posing practice as you put in your diet and supplements and training and all that kind of stuff. So to go back to the diet, because I think my audience is especially interested in a carnivore diet. It's become very popular these days, and I think first keto was very popular and people understood the importance of exposing your body to a fat-based metabolism, and then over time people realized that some plants might not be that great for everybody, and some plants might actually want to hurt you because they don't want to be eaten. So now carnivore diets are gaining popularity, and I kind of started doing more videos on that just because I noticed that there was a lot of demand, and it coincided with the fact that I started doing a carnivore diet, and I just shared one time that I was doing that, and there was a lot of interest. And so from there I started delving deeper into this topic. But I haven't seen a lot of bodybuilders doing competition on a carnivore diet. And I think the biggest thing that comes up is the volume of food, because if you see a lot of bodybuilders, they're eating a lot of salads or a lot of high volume foods to keep their caloric intake low. So what would your advice be in terms of keeping the volume of intake, or what do you do with regards to cravings and hunger on a carnivore diet?
I think if in a bodybuilding context, it's important to add flavor to your food. So you have to take pride in each meal you eat. So focus on, having your meal, like sit outside on your own, just eat it and just enjoy it. So I think the mindfulness is quite important towards eating. Other than that, I'd say you can vary your choice of meat. So you can choose more leaner meats like chicken or turkey. And over here you can get lean beef burgers and things like that. So you can also, so one of my meals was, I think my first meal was about 3 beef burgers in the morning and a tin of mackerel. I do that for
and you have it without any bread or anything, the tuna?
Yeah, it was just mackerel from a can on its own.
Okay.
Just
and water
from a can.
Or in oil?
It's water. Yeah, I knew that one.
Of course.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the packaging. So some that say sunflower oil. Ideally, you want it with brine or water. So.
Okay, so you'll have that in the morning. That's the thing is, the protein is filling, but as you get lower and lower in calories, it can be very tempting to have a salad, to just whip up a big salad, fill yourself up with that, and it doesn't take up too many calories, right? So what are other tips that you have, or maybe you don't feel the need for increasing volume because you're working out so hard, so your calories aren't going too low, maybe?
I think the difference this time was I was able to train hard. I was doing probably roughly 3.5 hours of exercise every single day, apart from my weight training days. 3.5, yeah. So it includes things like dog walking, cycling, cardio at the gym, then an hour and a half of weights.
So you're doing that during prep?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
it's
that
not very uncommon, but
I see. So okay, so half an hour of cycling and an hour and a half of bodybuilding. and then you're physically active the rest of your day. So that's increasing your caloric burn. So yeah, I think if you do that, you really never get so low down with the calories to the point of feeling like you have to resort to high volume foods or have to resort to very low calorie meals, correct?
I think that was it. Because the carnivore diet approach that I used was, the lowest I got was 3,600 calories.
Right.
To anyone, that's a lot of food, you know, that's a lot of meat. My protein intake was around 500 plus grams a day, every day. My fat kind of scaled down as I got leaner, but I noticed I almost had to like refeed myself with a bit more fat every now and then, just to keep my cognition sort of thing.
Right, so. Of course. So I think that solves it. And I think that's a good tip for somebody who wants to compete, but at the same time wants to maintain optimal health, because you might do a carnivore diet just because for like those last 2 weeks, let's say, or a few weeks for competition, but you can go back and eat plant foods, no problem. Some people just have to be on a carnivore diet because they have eczema or psoriasis or some autoimmune condition where it's not really an option. And so for those people, it might be a little bit trickier to maintain the lifestyle year round on a carnivore diet. So I think a great tip here is just increase your overall caloric burn. Find things you enjoy doing, hobbies or jobs you enjoy doing that can be very physically, you know, active. And that way you're just burning so many calories that it's not a problem anymore. You don't have to worry about eating beef, because beef can be a little bit more calorific compared to something like chicken or turkey, for example.
I also noticed the calories in, calories out model doesn't really apply when you do the diet. I mean, I've tried it whilst bulking up in the off season. I'd need to eat thousands upon thousands of calories. I don't even know how many, probably 6,000 or 7,000 a day, just to even maintain my weight.
Wow.
So there's
on a carnivore diet, you mean you tried bulking on strictly a carnivore diet?
I've tried it, yeah, but I found it just so difficult to eat 350 grams of fat a day. That's quite tough.
Right. Did you have any digestive issues, diarrhea maybe, with a high fat approach like that one, the bulking?
I know people do, but I didn't. I think because it's coupled with high protein.
Right.
I think that was why, but I don't know.
I think also sometimes people take supplements that might have like magnesium or vitamin C, but that could increase the probability of having diarrhea. Or way too much fat, even more than what you've had.
That's right. Yeah, I noticed also in your YouTube description at the bottom, you kind of advocate magnesium bisglycinate and citrate.
Yeah.
And you sort of suggest for citrates for constipation, bisglycinate for diarrhea. I have noticed the citrate does help me if I'm struggling. So
yes, me too.
That's important to mention as well.
Me too, because I tend towards constipation. And when I grew up eating a plant-based diet, I was always constipated, not even knowing I was constipated. I think people should check out the Bristol stool chart to see what constipation looks like, because just because you're going doesn't mean you're not constipated. And then so the carnivore diet helped me tremendously in that. But I always also need to take magnesium. And for me, for somebody who knows I tend towards constipation, then I always choose to get the magnesium citrate. And if I ever do get magnesium glycinate, then constipation comes back. Yeah. So we need to pay attention. Yeah. Do you take any supplements?
Oh, I couldn't list them all. I take a B complex.
Okay.
I use a lot of taurine, around 15 to 20 grams a day.
Okay.
And sometimes I take omega-3s, but I don't use the traditional ones which are toxic, so to speak. I'd buy a very high quality one when they've got 9 stages of filtration and things like that. Trying to think what else. Magnesium I've used. I don't think all of these are necessary, but I think once you add them in, sometimes you notice like a bit of an immediate, oh wow, something helps whatever ailment. Then it kind of goes back to normal, but you're afraid to take it out. So I think that's what the issues with a lot of bodybuilders have is they'll add supplements in and keep adding them in. But
Yeah.
really, they just need to scale it down, which I think every now and then you have to do, I think.
Why do you take so much taurine?
Basically, it helps with constipation. Long story short. So also it's good for liver detoxification and like a testosterone production. So I noticed they use that in studies to alleviate some of the problems with hypogonadism, things like that. And it's also from what I've learned from Harry Sopanos, if you've heard of him.
No.
No, he's good friends with Bart Kate. If you ask him, he'll bring him up. But he's very well read in nutrition, just like Bart. His podcasts are around 3-4 hours long, so you got, you know, just two a week on a Sunday, I believe. So they're worth listening into.
Okay, well, maybe you can share this his social media stuff with me later on. Just email me his stuff. I'll check him out.
Yeah, sure.
I think also when you go low fat, by necessity, if you're prepping for a competition, then that could also lead to a tendency towards constipation. So that's another thing that it doesn't mean that the diet is causing constipation. It's just you're doing it for a very specific reason. And because you're competing, you have to be low fat. You can't overdo it with the calories. And so you need the fat to be able to use the bathroom. So that's another thing.
That's kind of the caveat towards bodybuilding. You have to understand, if you're doing it, you take on the responsibility and understanding that the last 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks are tough in your body, and it's not healthy. So you've got to take that into account, obviously. But otherwise, I wouldn't advocate what I was doing, like extremely high protein and moderate fat. I'd say more. I'd lean more towards higher fat, low to moderate protein.
Exactly, because you don't want to get into rabid starvation, which is when I don't know, I'm sure my audience probably already knows that, but this is basically when you could potentially die if you just do a high protein, very low fat diet, as is the case with the Arctic explorers, where they only ate rabbits, which were a very lean form of protein, and that led them to having really serious issues. Some of them died. So that's why we don't advocate for high protein, low fat. Ideally, if you're doing a carnivore diet, you want to make sure you have enough fat, if not plenty of fat. If you're cutting down to be on a caloric, to be on a diet, to lose body fat, then that's different. And you're doing it for a short period of time, and that's measured. So that's okay, because you know you're not going to do that for the rest of your life. Yeah. So we talked about recovery. Do you do any additional forms of recovery, like magnesium salts, you know, like baths, or those machines that, you know, the machines that have a vibrator at the end?
Theraguns.
Theraguns, exactly.
So I think that's what
those are like the well-known brands of it. What are like some other tools that you do, if you do those at all, to kind of speed up your recovery process?
I'd say at my body weight and my level, is in the amount of training I would have to do for a competition. Recovery becomes paramount above everything else, because you got to think out, you got to live out the longevity of an 8, 10, you know, or longer week diet. So you have to recover. If your output's so high, you're not actually spending that much time in a rested state. Your sympathetic nervous system's always going haywire, sort of thing. So you have to find ways to calm down, which is really important. I find music quite helpful, actually. So calming music. I think resting the mind helps you rest the body as well. There's a bit of a link there. So I do a lot of stretching, especially pre-contest.
Foam rolling?
I find it's a bit of foam rolling as well. I found very, very slow cardio, so like steady state, was quite good for recovery. I noticed less soreness, at least.
Yeah, it also burns through some excess cortisol when you're doing like a low intensity kind of low background level of cardio. It burns through any excess stress, specifically cortisol, so that helps. What about sleep?
Sleep, that becomes very difficult. Because the carnivore diet's so satiating, you don't really think about food, but like mentally, but your body knows it's missing something. It's not got enough substrate to you know, because your body fat's going down and down and down. It doesn't want to get lower. It just wants to maintain homeostasis. But yeah, I found sleep became more difficult as I got close towards the end of the diet. I'd say just try everything you can. So even some herbal supplements might help. So valerian, chamomile. You know, try and avoid the more toxic things and try and avoid prescription medication if possible. That's something a lot of bodybuilders suffer with, is the sleep aspect.
I know, especially as you get closer and closer to your competition. And outside of that, when you're not dieting down, how many hours of sleep do you normally get? Do you prioritize sleep? How does that work?
I do prioritize sleep, so I make sure I'm asleep and in bed at a good time. I'd say I get at least 8 hours. I might wake up once or twice in the night. In that, I'd say probably 3 or 4 times a week I'll have a nap in the middle afternoon as well, if like time allows. So I'd say I get at least 8 hours generally most days. That's
awesome. Yeah, don't you wish that we're one of those people who only require 4 hours of sleep? I think like The Rock, or there's like 2% of the population, they have a genetic mutation that allows them to be very efficient in sleep. And in 4 hours, they do all the things that sleep's supposed to do, and they wake up refreshed.
I don't know if you know, but Ronnie Coleman was one of those people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's he'd go to bed at like 2 in the morning and get up at like 6 or 7 and just do like an hour on the treadmill or something, and that was just normal for him, and he'd do it week in, week out. Yeah, 5 hours is a bit rough.
Wow. Yeah, I got maybe 7 hours of sleep last night, and I woke up not happy because I'm like, I need 8, if not even 9 hours of sleep sometimes. And that's another thing. When you're training hard, it actually increases your needs for sleep. So on the days that you actually do 3 hours or 4 hours of physical activity, your body is going to require more sleep than on the day where you recovered and you didn't move a muscle. So people also need to factor that in if you're competing. It's not just the diet and the training, it's also increased sleep needs and then increased recovery needs, all those things.
I'd agree. Yeah, I found exactly the same. I find, because your body is always, like I mentioned earlier, that sympathetic nervous system state when you're up and moving, it's really important to find time to calm your mind down and actually your body as well. So yeah, you'll just, if you have an hour spare just to take a nap, just do it. It's going to give you so much more benefit and longevity in the diet. I think also a man named Stan Efferding, he's a bodybuilder / powerlifter. You might have heard of him.
Yeah.
He advocates, you know, sleep above anything else. So apparently there's a study done where people that would sleep, say, I think it's like 4 to 6 hours a night, then do an hour of cardio. They actually got worse results than the people that are sleeping 8 hours a night but no cardio. So sleep, you know, you got to keep that on top of your priority list, I think.
Interesting. Do you put an alarm? Like, what time do you wake up in the morning?
I wake up around 6:30 each day. Depends on my work schedule, but I usually don't have to get up until 7 or 8. Yeah, my breakfast is always about 8 o'clock though.
So you're not intermittent fasting? No,
I do like that in dieting phases. So I'm not someone to shy away from, oh, I've not eaten for a few hours, you know. Like that won't bother me. But as you increase your caloric needs as you're close towards the off season, you're not needing so many more calories. So 6,000 calories a day on, say, 2 or 3 meals is going to be really tough on your body. So I think just having more time to do it. But like I mentioned earlier, it's not, bodybuilding isn't healthy. I don't advocate people do it. It's just something I'm a bit obsessed about and just have gone on doing, sort of thing. But yeah, take your health above everything else. It's important.
Yeah. So for that reason, you break up your meals into multiple meals just to be able to fit in all the protein and all the nutrients that you're going to need to support the level of work that you're doing with your weightlifting. And
exactly.
And what do you say to people who are scared of doing a carnivore diet, and most people that ask me that question, they're not competing, but they want to lift and they want to look good and they want to be strong, and they're scared that if you do a carnivore diet, which is a subtype of a ketogenic diet, so it's very low, actually it has no carbs in it, they're scared that they're not going to have the same level of energy, or they feel it's going to mess up their thyroid. And at some point they're going to have to do, let's say, a carbohydrate loading phase or a carb cycling thing. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think you can just keep doing carnivore and lift as heavy and progress with your weights, or do you feel like it's important to do carb cycling or carb loading intermittently?
I believe the carb cycling thing isn't really, it's useful if you're doing a diet with carbohydrates in, yeah, because it stops the stall of your metabolism, basically. So your body doesn't really know what it's doing, so it just uses the carbohydrates for energy. Then your metabolism just maintains better. If you're just doing a carnivore diet, there isn't any need for carbohydrates in the diet at all. Any sort of glucose requirements that in your body would be filled through gluconeogenesis anyway. So that's, you know, the breakdown of protein into sugar molecules. So yeah, it never really fazed me, that. And I think if you're gonna go low carb or carnivore, just do it like low carb. It's a lot easier to adhere to, I think.
Yeah. And then I think it's limiting beliefs that a lot of people have just from blogs or doctors and dietitians that are telling us you need to do that kind of stuff. So I think realizing that you don't necessarily have to include it on a regular basis, and you're still improving and you're still training and all that kind of stuff, that in and of itself can help break mental limitations that you've placed upon yourself, I think. Yeah,
certainly.
okay, so what do you think people should know about, if like, or what advice do you have for somebody who wants to compete, is interested in competing, and also wants to do it on a carnivore diet, whether by choice just to optimize health, or by necessity because they have some autoimmune condition or something that just is absolutely necessary that they only eat that kind of diet? What advice would you have?
I'd say start high. So don't start a diet and think, oh, you want to get results now. You're much better off just finding your appetite regulation just through having a higher fat diet. Then once that's sort of maintained you, and if you have autoimmune diseases that killed you, then you can start to taper that around and go if you've got a body composition goal. But yeah, there's so many different approaches to it that, like you said, there's like a cyclical ketogenic approach. There's, if you've heard of paleo medicina.
Yeah.
Their approach is 80% fat, 20% protein, but it's more so the food volume aspect that is integral to that diet. So they say only eat 1 meal or 2 meals a day of, I believe it's 400 grams, might be wrong, but yeah, there's that to look into as well. And the other thing on that note is I think people over consume water. At least what I notice anyway. I mean, your body doesn't really need that much if you're eating enough fat. You can produce metabolic water anyway. But like I said, you have to have the fat high enough to do that. Yeah, and I think like it's just a cleaner source of energy when you're sort of burning through ketones and fat in your bloodstream. You don't feel the crashes, you don't have weird appetite problems. Your cognition's a lot better. Your vision seems better as well. All sorts of things.
Yeah. So start on a higher fat diet initially, and then you can play around with your macros, especially the protein and energy ratios, and then see, you know, how you're going to achieve a caloric deficit while not compromising other things.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing could be food preparation techniques as well. So I've been slow cooking a lot of food recently. I found my digestion is heaps better doing that versus chucking something in the air fryer. Doesn't work for some things, admittedly, like you can't get nice sear on a steak, but you know, sometimes you can make like some nice pulled beef brisket or something. That's quite nice.
Okay. Do you are you taking on clients? Do you train people?
I coach some people with nutrition. Yeah, so I've had a lot of success with that, like a personal level with people. I don't charge a lot of money to people either. I just charge them for my time pretty much because it's more of a passion for me. It's not something at the moment I'm looking at making into a business, so to speak. But I do enjoy it a lot. It's really, you know, I've been into it for so long now. I just love helping people.
Yeah. And I will share, if you have any resources to share with my audience, if they want to get in touch with you, I'll make sure I place all those things in the description box below. But before,
Sure, yeah.
did we miss anything? Do you think there was anything important that we missed talking about?
I don't know how much time you've got, but I had a few questions that people asked me.
Go ahead, sure.
I'll just pull them up. So yeah, one was actually, someone asked me what I'll do 48 hours before a show.
Okay.
So a lot of people have different strategies towards that. So people often do things like dehydration, sodium manipulation. I find if you're following, you know, basically a protein fat-based diet, you know, specifically carnivore, you don't necessarily need to do any of those things.
Okay.
Your body's water content, which also affects your appearance and stage, the subcutaneous water, will ultimately be based on your body fat. So the less fat you have, the less water you hold. So oftentimes people use that kind of period as almost like a crutch to try and use a different, you know, prescription medication to drop the water perhaps. But I don't think it's really necessary. There are herbal sort of diuretics as well you could use.
Yeah,
but
it
you
could be
shouldn't,
risky
ideally you shouldn't
too.
need it. Very risky. Yeah, there's been a lot of concerns recently with bodybuilders with poor kidney health.
Yeah.
I believe that's linked to high potassium levels, so hypokalemia. I don't really know how they combat that other than just to, you know, minimize the periods between shows so they're not going overboard with different medications and herbal diuretics.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great tip, great advice there. And you don't need to be on those medications. There are a lot of top competitors that will not touch those things. But I know that are a lot more also that think it's just a normal part of competition, and that's not necessarily the case, especially if you're doing what you're doing, which is a carnivore diet. Your body isn't retaining water anyway, because if you're not eating the carbs and the rice cakes and the rice, it's not going to hold on to the water, because every gram of starch is going to hold on to over 3 grams of water. So
That's right, yeah.
That's the main driving force there. Okay.
I agree, yeah.
Any other questions you had, or people feel they asked a lot?
I had a question about oh yeah, so scaling up cardio pre-contest. I think most training, Bart Key would advocate this as well probably, should be relevant to what you're doing. So you're not a long distance runner, so you're not really going to be running on a treadmill. But what you can do is either sprints if your body allows you to do it, or like a slow sort of incline walk or something. And you'd probably taper that up as you get closer towards the show. But ideally, I don't like to use exercise too much, because I think people end up like using so much energy towards, like, say, an hour of cardio or 2 hours of cardio a day, and think, oh, I've earned this extra food now. And it's really like that extra hour or two is putting a dent in your recovery. You got to look at it as a whole. I think people get too myopic.
That's a great tip. I've been guilty of doing that, whereby I so am hanging on to certain foods or protein bars that I want to keep in my diet. And I would, just add 1 more hour of running. And it's like, that's not the best way, because now I need more sleep, I need more recovery, and I'm not putting good habits in place. I'm still keeping that addictive mindset, because those protein bars are very addictive. They taste really good.
Yeah.
That's why I want to keep them, So yeah, I think the first habit would be to change the quality of your diet. And after you change the quality of your diet, then you see how much physical activity you need to achieve that caloric deficit. And you will realize that if you focus on food quality first, oftentimes you don't need that much cardio to achieve a pretty good caloric deficit, right?
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, it's diminishing returns with cardio, because I think there's been studies where people that have done it more and more and more, their thyroid output goes down and down and down. So
Their what goes down and down?
Their thyroid hormone output.
Yeah.
So they have that kind of issue there. So they're actually just making themselves slower and less efficient and have less muscle ultimately.
Yeah.
So.
That's your body's like defense mechanism, because your body is it's shocked that you're trying to waste it away. So it's trying to hang on to its set weight, if you want. And it does those countermeasures. This is why, like you said, I think it's a great advice. If you want to doing cardio, either do short bursts like you're doing, or do sprints. Like I'll run, but like I won't run as if I'm training for a marathon. I'll do as fast as I can. Like I literally have to feel like I'm about to die. I'm pushing myself, you know, but then I'm not doing it forever. So that's different, because now you're stimulating your body to become stronger and have more mitochondria, and so you're not allowing the body to work against you when you're trying to lose weight, and it's slowing its metabolism, you know. Yeah,
completely.
yeah. You know what, you know, before we finish, I think we should give our audience like a meal plan of an average meal plan of what you would eat on competition on a carnivore diet. Because I feel like if you don't do that, they'll kill me.
Yeah. I believe I did 5 meals a day again. Sometimes I did 4. Each meal spaced out maybe 3 hours. First meal was always beef burgers, maybe a slice of cheese or something. You can get like American cheese slices, then you can get like the lower fat ones as well over here. So you can also scale down the fat using that sort of method. So you can still eat what you'd like, but not suffer too much.
What percent fat the beef burger patties are?
Those were only 5% fat, those ones.
Oh wow, okay, the super lean ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to cook them in a way to keep them juicy a little bit, right? You can't overcook.
Right, yeah. So I'd often use like butter, or I found in the air fryer it's not too bad if you just put enough butter on top of it or something, but don't go overboard, because obviously it's hard to measure fat. You know, when you're adding it to all your foods, you know, you want to ideally weigh it out if possible. And also mackerel of that meal. Second meal was always after my workout, so that'd be around 11:30. That was always, I believe, it's basically what I call like a protein ice cream. So I'd put 2 or 3 scoops of whey protein powder with Greek yogurt, blend it up, then put it in the freezer overnight. And you take it out, and it takes about 2 hours to sort of thaw and defrost slightly. But it's a bit of a treat, considering all you're eating is meat and things like that. It still kind of fits into the carnivore paradigm, yeah. Then the next meal was, I believe, beef and cheese. So I'd have almost like a cheese board selection. So that was quite mainstay in my diet, because obviously cheese is quite addictive. So I thought, well, if I keep it in, it's better than just avoiding it, then craving it big time. Then my last 2 meals were always either chicken, like in a large volume, so it might be a pound or so of chicken, and usually fish. The last meal would be salmon or mackerel, but quite a bit, so maybe about a pound of that as well. So
let's do the chicken. You're not having any vegetables next to that. So what is giving it flavor? How are you cooking it?
We have things over here called skinny sauces, like slim syrups, things like that. They're basically water, a bit of xanthan gum, salt, vinegar, and a few mystery ingredients. But they sort of add a bit of colour to your diet as well, which is quite nice. But they're quite sweet. But
yeah,
you know, they're not ideal. But I'm not someone that suffers with extreme autoimmune diseases, so I'm not someone that needs to hyper focus on that. But yeah, be vigilant of those sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult if you have something where you have to be 100% carnivore and compete at the level that you're competing. It's like really hard to do those things, because then you won't be able to have things maybe like the cheese or the sauces, those little things that can give your food some little bit of fun, you know, a little bit of flavor. And you're doing, I'm assuming, chicken breasts, right?
Yeah, chicken breast. I do thighs more at the start of the prep. As I got leaner, I was going more towards breast. Yeah.
Yeah. I do chicken thighs a lot. I'll cut off like the fat from them and I'll put them in a crock pot. And if you, that's a great tip, I guess, for people as well. Put it in a crock pot with some bone broth or just regular broth. It'll literally fall apart and it'll be really, really juicy. Whether you can do that with chicken breast. I've tried it with chicken breast. It tastes just as good as the chicken thighs where you remove the fat of it. Also tastes great. So those are the things that you would need to do if you want to compete. But if you just want to optimize health, then it's a different carnivore diet where you want to keep the fat in, and you know, you don't want to be adding sauces and things like that. So those are two different goals.
For sure, yeah. If you got time, I was going to offer two more dietary hacks, basically. So one was, if like say at night time, 11 o'clock, you're really hungry, you've not eaten enough throughout the day, you can have like an OXO cube or a Bovril cube. Don't know if you got them over there, but they're kind of like gravy stock cubes.
Oh yeah, broth cubes.
So, yeah, basically it's just bouillon. Yeah, so they're basically just salt and
flavor,
beef extract, things like that.
My mom used to add them to anything she cooked.
Yeah, that's a cup of that before bed if you're really hungry does sort you out. The other thing is sugar-free jelly as well. That's a bit of a crutch of mine. It's very voluminous, but I didn't do it all the time. It'd just be sometimes if I really.
You'll just get a jar of sugar-free jam.
Oh, sugar-free jelly. So like it's jam over there, isn't it? Jello.
Oh, Jello. I see.
Like, you know, the shapes.
The Jello. Yeah, no, I know. I thought jelly meant to jam, because here I think we can use those terms interchangeably.
Yeah.
Like marmalade, jam, jelly, it's like the same, but then we say we have Jello, like the gelatin-based desserts.
Yeah.
So yeah, sugar-free gelatin-based desserts, those are like 10 calories, if not less.
Saint daft, yeah.
If you get the sugar-free ones, those are good ways to curb your cravings on a carnivore.
They help a lot.
Cycle. I can imagine. And once, okay, now that's what you do for 8-12 weeks, whatever it takes, you know, for you to be ready. Once you're not competing, right after you're going back on, let's say, a building phase, how much does it change? You said you added rice, right? And potatoes. Is there anything else that you add?
Every now and then I might have some bread and butter. That's quite what people argue, but it's quite an English sort of staple, so it's very typical of us to eat things like that. But yeah, I'd add a few different things, but nothing too different, I wouldn't say. But yeah, I think it's important to scale up the food out. Salad, no, I don't really eat vegetables unless I'm having the equivalent of your like Thanksgiving dinner sort of thing. But other than that, no.
You know, I forgot to ask you about caffeine. Do you do that?
I do, yeah. I just save that for workouts. So I'd use a pre-workout supplement or just have a cup of coffee before the gym sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's a bad addiction. It's not optimal, but I mean, it could be a lot worse. I could be drinking 3 or 4 cups a day like a lot of people, so.
True. It gives me headache, like intermittent headaches, especially if I get stressed out on some day. I've noticed that I'm much more prone to getting headaches when I'm drinking coffee. So in 1 week, I will celebrate 4 months being caffeine free. Very happy about that. I know, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you. I've done it before. I've done 1 month caffeine free and then another separate month. But I still wanted to keep trying to see how long I can last. And I feel like now that I've done it for 4 months, I feel like I don't think I'll ever go back. And no headaches since.
That's the thing about addictions. As soon as you break it, you then got to start the clock again. So that's good enough deterrent, I think, you know, to not want to start back at square one.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, I know. But you have to reframe it too, because the first time I did it for 1 month and then I went back and I drank coffee. I had to reframe it in my mind and say, look, I mean, I was able to do 30 days. That's a pretty good accomplishment. So in the past, I would have looked at that as a failure. Like, I went back to drink coffee. I must have failed at that. But if you look at it as like a stepping stone towards being able to do it for longer and longer, that's why I was motivated to try it again. And it also did it for a month, but like the third time it stuck. So I think that's a good advice also for competition, because you're not probably going to win. I mean, I hope you do, anybody's listening, your first competition, but at least in the United States, it's very competitive. I'm not sure how competitive it is, how many people are interested in that in the UK. So don't go into the mindset of, I'm going to win this competition. If I don't, I'm a failure. No, every competition, and you probably can tell us how much you learn with every prep, right? Because now the second prep is going to become easier from all those things you learn.
I must admit, yeah, with experience, it becomes a lot easier because you almost master what you're trying to do. People say, how can you do this diet for this long? And, you know, whatever. I think I've done it this many times before. I've been all right. So I'll just keep doing it. So, you know, that's basically my rationale behind it.
I hope you achieve your ultimate goal and win the biggest of the competitions, and then we'll have you talk about that, hopefully.
Yeah.
What else? I guess I'm going to link all of your information. Just email me any pertinent, information, especially ways people want to contact you. I'll place them in the description box below. Yeah, I think we covered everything that I wanted to make sure we covered. Yeah, I think that's it. And
brilliant.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. I was so excited. I'm very happy about this topic. I've always wanted to compete. I still want to compete. So maybe when I go back into prep, I'll let you know, and you can help me out as well. We can chat about that.
Yeah, sure, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for coming over. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, bye, everybody.